Hey everyone, thanks for joining in on episode 6. Yeah. We are super excited today because we have invited our board of directors to join us in this podcast. And if you're sitting at home being like, oh my gosh, you're sitting too close to each other, have no fear. They are our husbands. So I've got Braden right here and Jody sitting beside Ryan. We're so excited to have them because they are the ones, like Jody mentioned in our last podcast, that kind of keep us on the straight and narrow. Jody and I sometimes get lost in our gigantic dreams of changing the world. Someone's calling.
Yep. That was my mom.
On.
June, you're next week, dude. I love it. Anyways, we'll just keep rolling. So we're super excited to have you guys here today. And the topic of conversation that Jody and I would like to center this video around is just the idea actually of sort of body image and beauty, female body image and female beauty according to sort of a man's perspective. We think that oftentimes women are really hard on themselves and we have these deep-rooted paradigms about what body image should be and is, and just kind of we get lost in our own minds and we have ideas of what men think about us that who knows if it's actually true. So we just kind of want to dive into some of that conversation to build some perspective coming from both genders, and then also hopefully sort of find some like a middle ground meeting point of where do we actually overlap in some of the body image, like in that body image topic. And so we'll dive into a couple of sort of fun questions just to start and warm you guys up, and then we're gonna throw some really hard questions at you.
Okay.
Yeah. So fun questions first. Just so our audience can get to know you guys a little bit better. So what's my question? If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say?
Got milk.
God, everyone else has these like profound answers.
He's like, first thing in mind comes out the most.
Love it.
Got milk.
Mine would be better.
By drinking milk.
By drinking milk. That's right.
Braden's is here, be better. Ryan's right beside. By drinking
That's
milk.
Dairy-free milk.
Yeah.
Not milk. Not milk.
Got oat milk. Okay, next question. What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life?
Air fryer.
$100 or less.
$100 or less. Yeah.
A coupon towards my new mountain bike.
Nice.
But that doesn't
You want to change your answer to that?
I wish. No, maybe pregnancy
Oh God.
knee pads for mountain biking. Okay. Okay. It's all about mountain biking at this
Right,
point.
On your knees a lot?
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Should we do another one?
Yeah, let's do one more.
Okay. Okay, here's a good one. What is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love? So either an unusual habit that you have that people might think is kind of quirky, or an absurd thing that you absolutely love, like something you're obsessed about that is maybe also kind of quirky.
I'm obsessed about research.
Yeah,
The
you
worst.
are.
When I go down a rabbit trail, I don't stop till I get some answers.
So a weird habit?
Either an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you're kind of obsessed with.
Absurd. I don't know. It's hard. Well, you could answer that question.
I could answer that.
Yeah,
I
you should answer that.
popped
Yeah.
into my head right
Okay,
away.
What are my weird habits? Let's hear this.
I would say you are obsessed with YouTube videos, like how to do it yourself YouTube videos.
That's research.
It is research.
Oh my gosh.
I'm obsessed with improving my own knowledge and skill set.
Oh, you see how he swung that
Be
around?
better.
Yeah.
Drink nut milk.
Yeah.
Be better.
Oh my gosh, that's too fun.
That's awesome.
I have one more question though, because we did this last week where we were just talking about what we're following on social media. Hey girls! So what's like, now that you've got all the extra time to scroll and surf, what's your big thing that you've tuned into, like social media or Netflix or what are you watching?
What are we
Take it
watching?
away, Ryan.
On Netflix, we just started the new one, Dark.
Dark.
Right?
We just finished Blacklist.
Yeah.
And now we're into Dark, which is dark.
It's good, but it's dark.
Yeah.
What was the other part? I have a short-term memory issue. What's the other one?
Doesn't matter. It's just if there's anything that's interesting on social media or anything that you're following. If there's nothing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right.
Like, has anything popped up that you,
Not so much. Well, social media is nothing but COVID. So I'm sick of that by now. Before I was doing research up the yin yang, but now I just want something else to occupy my time with. Right?
the truck videos are entertaining though.
Yeah, from that perspective. You guys?
Yeah, what about you?
I've been watching The Last Kingdom, and speaking of body image, Uhtred. He's really handsome.
That's another one that's on our list. The last
Yeah, it's great.
watch together. Yeah.
He's the man. That's really good. And then we've been watching a lot of, how-to videos, but things like gardening. The shocker is how vibrant some of these gardeners are. They're fabulous. They're very entertaining. So gardening, sourdough making,
Oh yeah.
the fixing bikes. I've been fixing up a bike. So lots of research.
And right, your social media answer was wrong. You've been just obsessed with watching Jody and Court podcasts with the correct answer.
That's right.
Well, it's an obvious.
Yeah,
On repeat.
on
Yes.
repeat. Just replay once a day.
Like breathing air.
Yeah.
That's a breathing
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I feel like we know you guys. Okay, so we kind of want to sort of take this a little bit, starting on like getting you guys to help us and other women out there to understand sort of the man's perspective on female beauty and body image, and then sort of we'll switch gears and we want to sort of switch it to you guys on how, just body image with like for you guys, what that's all like and how we can be of service to you guys as men with your own body image issues. Feel free to take it if you like. I mean, we're asking you to sort of represent mankind, but that's really hard to do as just two people.
So we're the full spectrum.
You know what I mean? Like,
We got a Trekkie, got a vegan.
yeah. If you guys are like, like personally to you, or maybe you know that like it's more true to sort of like more generally, this is something, that, when you're with your buddies kind of thing, like what, that kind of talk where it's more of a broad statement, maybe just to let us know so that if we know it's just that specific to you, or if it's more a generalization to men. But just to kind of, I guess, to start us off in gaining this understanding of beauty from a man's perspective, I'm just looking at my notes here. Women, we have ideas of what men think of us, but we want to know what men think. Like, what do you guys think of female beauty versus what we think you think of female beauty? What is beautiful to you? Or I don't know, you can take that any way that you want to go. It doesn't really matter. It could just open it up into conversation.
There's a lot of thinking in that sentence.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an interesting question because I can see it from various perspectives. There is, of course, the kind of stereotypical, then of kind of the social media, the media in general perspective, right? And that's what we see in advertisements and that kind of thing. And that's advertisement. That's not realistic. You know, there's that piece of that, and there's I would assume there's a large portion of men in the world that view that as what women are and what women should be, and that kind of thing, right? I think I see that a lot more in the youth, right? As a teacher and a high school teacher, you know, that untrue nature of what women represent and what women are to represent. I think that's out there because it's in the media, and that's kind of what's educating our youth per se. So I think there's that piece of it, which is false in every perspective, you know, in terms of reality. And then there's the truth, and the truth is a whole lot different than what is perpetuated in media, you know.
How much does that play into, like, I don't know, as a woman, I have this sort of like understanding that when guys are behind closed doors, it's all that sort of like conversation is very crude, I guess, maybe not crude is the right word, but that they like very objectifying towards women. That's just what's ingrained in my mind, is that when guys get together, they talk about boobs and butts and, like, you know, and whatever. And but that in my mind, I guess, I think somewhere internalizes that, oh, if I want them to be talking about me, then I need to look that certain way, or I need to be that kind of person. Like, is that what actually happens? Or do we just make this up that, like, you guys talk about that kind of stuff? I know that Braden doesn't, because he'll just talk about hockey, but you know what I mean? And, like, does that, I'm sorry, it's not very clear, but does that kind of make sense?
Again, I think it depends on the demographics. If you're talking about young men, you know, as a young man, when I was a teenager, you know, and the hormones are driving everything in your existence, you know, I think a lot of it back then is that, because you're young and stupid and hormonal and everything to go with that, you know. But I think if we're talking about, you know, which demographic we're referring to, you know, because as now at this point in my life, none of that comes up, you know, in terms of mature relationships and whatnot. You know, that's just not really part of the conversation behind closed doors, if you will, with the guys that at least that I associate with, you know. And even in the whole locker room thing, you know, none of that comes up, as most guys that I'm associated with are, you know, married men, or we're married men at some point, or have you know, daughters and sons and whatnot. So I would say it's not necessarily in the everyday, maybe, you know, in the bar scene type scenario, perhaps, but not in the pub, you know, not in those kind of scenarios. So I think it really depends on the circumstance and the demographic, you know,
and the maturity level.
Maturity level. And that's what, that definitely comes into it, right? So it's hard to say, you know, where it's, you know, because I do remember times in my life where that was the conversation, but I was like 16 or 17 or 18, you know. And even then, it's usually only the presence of other men. So it's usually that peer pressure, you know, showboating type scenario where that really comes up. Right. And I think that's a lot of where that comes from. It's about appearance and looking or presenting a certain way to other male friends by behaving in that way, not making it appropriate, but that's, I think, where really a lot of that comes from is that untrue masculine piece of just trying to make yourself look a certain way by behaving a certain way, you know, I think, from my perspective at least.
Which is like body image on your guys' end too, then, right? Sort of, or like body image, or just image, I guess. Yeah, but
I think too, there's a major disconnect between the reality, which is exactly where Ryan nailed it. The reality is, when I get together with buddies, we talk about hockey and we talk about our kids and life in general. We're not talking about women and babes anymore. that was many years ago. And unfortunately, where I see a disconnect is when the rare times that I do go on social media, because it's so disgusting and so distracting. But when I do go on social media, it seems apparent that women believe that we are still talking about them that way. And that's why they post these Instagram photos versus the reality. And thank goodness we're starting to see a flip side of that now, where women feel as though they can be confident and express themselves confidently in their own bodies, on social media, but it's been a very, very long time, and that's still vastly the minority of women. And so the disconnect lies in where I see women believing what men are talking about versus what the reality is and what we're talking about. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Ryan's going to say something, I think.
Well, I think that's a big important piece of Braden mentioned. Like, if we're talking about, women that are in kind of our demographic, our age group and whatnot, are they still holding on to those kind of beliefs that they developed through their youth and their teenage years and young years in their 20s, where men were behaving in those ways, and almost men just behave in those ways, my perspective, because of their lack of security, their insecurities with themselves, their lack of self-confidence, trying to make themselves appear a certain way to their friends, and one way of doing that is to like that kind of superstar kind of lady, swag kind of style. And that's where we form a lot of our perspectives of our self-image is from our youth. Those young women that were targeted in, say, high school or junior high for how they looked by drastically immature young boys and young men. Those ideas perhaps are just extending into their 30s and 40s perhaps and onward. And I think that's where the big conversation has to go at some point in our society is educating young men about how to interact with each other and how to interact in terms of how to treat women in general and girls and how to speak to them and how to just go about your day without having to demean the other sex is an important lesson that I don't think is really being dealt with in society.
And unfortunately too, you get what you put out there. And so if there is a lady or a guy, this goes both ways. We've got some friends who are single and put out the most ridiculous photos on their dating apps and and social media. And then they complain that they're not getting high quality women. Well, of course you're getting a woman who's basing everything on your looks, and they don't care who you are, they care what you look like. And so you're going to get what you put out there. If you're putting out slutty photos, you're probably going to get knuckleheads coming after you.
There's like two kind of takeaways that I'm sort of hearing. Number one is that a lot of our understanding of our self-worth when it comes to our body, I guess, which probably trickles into our just our deeper understanding of our self-worth. I think, Rye, you kind of just put this out there really well. Like, it really isn't reflective of maybe my body right now, but what I learned what my body is like when I was younger, which is actually gives me a lot of hope in the sense that is like how many years ago, right? So for women out there who are still holding on to that, just that understanding that it has nothing to do with this present body. And if you're able to kind of have that separation of, oh, that was those knucklehead teenage boys who were saying those things, who I have no connection with at all anymore, and starting to pay attention with, well, what are the men who I love saying, what, like you guys, right? Like you guys you are the people you are the men that we spend the most amount of time with. And that's really important, which is the other takeaway, is that kind of touching on what you said too, is paying attention to who you're surrounding yourself with, right? Like if you're feeling really, pardon my French, but shitty about your body, maybe start paying attention to the messaging that is coming in at you by who you're actually putting around you all the time. And if those people are giving you negative messages about who you are, or making, contributing to a negative self-image, time to start changing who those people are, to build up an energetic space where you can actually step into this more self-love.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, there's a point to be made about, I think at our age, it shifts, maybe not consciously, but it shifts to being more self-aware and concerned about what other women think of our bodies, right? Like, yeah. We're in a healthy relationship where we know our partner respects our body and loves our body as is, it's almost like we crave that criticism, like we're addicted to the criticism. So it's like, even though you've been accepted by like the most important person in your life, there's like, I know I do this. It's like seeking out the criticism, right? It's like making up a story of like, well, now who's criticizing my body? Well, like all these other women are now looking at my body, and I'm now comparing my body to all the women I run with, or all the women at the gym, or the women that I work with, or the women on social media. And it really, it goes to the same point you guys were just talking about community and the people that you surround yourself with, right? In that taking a hard look at the women that are in your circle as well as the men in your circle. It's probably shifts more to that self-esteem with respect to other women.
There are tough shoes to fill in this town too, because we've got world-class athletes, and they've got goddess and god bodies, and they're brilliant people, and they've got a great energy about them. So I can see how anybody would get sucked down that hole.
Yeah, agreed, for sure.
Well, just social media in general.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
It's everywhere.
All the people that are, with good intentions, they're just presenting their own life, and they're, maybe they're entrepreneurs and trying to promote their yoga, this, or, personal fitness, this or that. So, it's just always present, that comparison. And so I think that comes back to the individual, like, why are you comparing yourself to them? They're not, like in those situations, they're not outwardly projecting and forcing you to judge yourself. They're not attacking you like perhaps was back when you're younger, in junior high or something like that. Now it's just an internal attack that we're placing on ourselves. That's not even present. Like, these people aren't judging us or judging,
It's a story that we're making up in our head.
Yeah, that's true. That's really what it boils down to, hey, is it's a story.
Yeah, about people we don't even know, which is even more ridiculous.
Out of context completely.
Right,
well.
when you think about it,
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Moving on to like another question that we had on our list was, this is kind of more fun, I think. I'm really quite curious about this question, is what is something that you see women do with respect to like maintaining their appearance in whatever fashion that you think is absolutely ridiculous?
I'll go first. Makeup. I don't understand makeup. And even light makeup. It's almost as if makeup companies have tricked women into believing that they're not beautiful enough. And it's ridiculous. It's demeaning. Women don't need makeup. And again, I touched on it a little bit, but finally we're seeing a movement with people like Alicia Keys who are realizing that there is a real standard of beauty and then there's a fake standard of beauty. And I don't understand the makeup thing and the money it costs. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, I second that. I've never understood makeup as a man. Like, I get it where it's like appropriate, like when you're on stage and those kind of specific applications, everyone's wearing makeup regardless, in those kind of situations. But like day to day, it just doesn't make any sense to me, like the purpose behind it. And I mean, I understand the purpose behind it, but why would Jody need to put makeup on? It's like, to my mind, it's like, take it off, like just take off the makeup, and au naturel is what is. If you fall in love with au naturel, you don't fall in love with makeup, right? Like, so it's just a facade that perpetuates that facade of a certain way of looking. And I'd never understood the purpose behind it. And I don't understand, like, it's not attractive to me in terms of, that caked on look. And you see some women, it's just like, I just want to take my putty knife and just like scrape, like, it's just so much. And I just don't understand where that need is coming from, because they're so much more beautiful without it. Like, just
it's almost like subconsciously women are being tricked into believing that you're not good enough as you are.
Totally.
Yeah, cover up your flaws, make your eyes look bigger than they are, right?
Yeah.
and this isn't specific to women, I guess, but another thing I don't understand, but I guess I see it more from a woman's perspective, like in terms of like photos, like with Instagram and those kind of things, is when they take these photos that aren't realistic. They're staged, and they're, whether, probably use makeup, and they're like just like, there's such a fakery to it that I just don't understand the need to do that. That's something else that I see a lot of women do. I just don't see as many men doing it. They're just very set up, like, and that's fine. Like, you want to do a photo shoot, all power to you, but often they're not. And well, the pure vast number of selfies, but fake selfies. Like, it's one thing to be just in the moment and take a selfie. What's one thing, but they're so staged. Like, I don't understand that. Yeah.
It is a culturally universal thing. However, when we lived in Korea, it was shocking. People on the train, and the train was packed like sardines, and women would stage these selfies as if they were superstars. It's shocking. And the ignorance and lack of awareness of people around them too, and what like I found myself being very judgmental, because it's not something that I indulge in, and it's not something that I respect in people. And I probably could have been a little bit more accepting about it, but it was hard to take because it was so superficial.
Yeah, I'm just not I'm not a selfie person. I'm not, I just don't find myself taking a lot of selfies, if you will. And so it just doesn't click to me. And it's just something that else I don't quite grasp.
What's interesting, you guys, is like, I'm just thinking about just different standards for men and women, because there's times where, so like when we're going to work and you're in a more professional setting, sometimes I feel that if I don't put makeup on to go to this professional setting, like that the makeup is part of my professional attire, which seems completely bogus, because why wouldn't you guys have to put makeup on then, right? If that's the requirement of being professional. But it's funny, because I feel like if I don't, do my hair, or, which, I mean, like, you guys would do your hair too or something like that, but if I don't have that sort
which
of
Ryan
polish,
did today,
yes,
very
nice job, extra product. But if I don't have that polished look, I feel like almost a worry of, am I going to be, am I going to get that mention of like, tidy up, or that are people judging me for showing, like, always, that same sort of feeling if you show up in your pajamas, that kind of thing, right? Which is
being like taken seriously.
Yeah,
totally. I second that for sure.
Yeah, marketing is very powerful, very, very powerful. It's tricked the men, it's tricked the women, and go ahead, Ryan.
I'm jumping in. Go ahead.
Inevitably, the women who put makeup on are, this is not based on research, but I may research it later. This is just a presumption, but I don't think it's far off to say that women who wear more makeup, probably on average, keep their jobs longer, which means they likely get paid more, which is insane. Probably better looking people have an easier time getting and retaining jobs.
Yeah, so it's almost like ingrained competitiveness in a sense. Like, I have to look better.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, and unfortunately, it is probably dependent upon what industry and what profession, whatever. But and no one's really going to admit to it and all that kind of stuff. But I think that double standard aspect, like as you mentioned for job interviews, obviously men would be expected to be probably clean shaven, like there is, for example, that kind of standard. And I guess that would be the equivalent to men's makeup would be to have a certain, level of grooming.
Right.
But it's not that fakery of modifying, putting makeup on, if you will, to change your appearance. And I think that expectation, that double standard is kind of disturbing, really. There's one thing to be taking care of, maintain your personal health and grooming and presenting yourself appropriately, but that additional piece, I think, is definitely double standard.
There's this other piece of it. It's interesting that we're going so much on this makeup idea, but I was in a play this year for the very first time, and when you get your makeup on, you really step into your character a lot when you put your costume on and your makeup on, right? And so I know a lot of women who have expressed the same thing, which is when they put their makeup on and they put on that, I don't know, there's certain clothes that they feel really confident in or whatever, but the makeup is a piece of that they feel like they're stepping into the world with more confidence. I guess, do you see value in that? Or is it just, again, I think that's probably a learned response, obviously, or yeah, probably because they get more different reactions from other people. But is it worthwhile then still to, if that's part of what's going to give you confidence to move towards things that are bigger than what you feel like you can handle without the makeup? I don't know. It's just interesting. It just reminds me of, it gave me more confidence when I was going on stage once I got my makeup on. I felt like I was ready to play the part.
I guess I have no idea. I've rarely wear makeup in my life. But I did let my sister put makeup on me at one point.
Actually, you know what was interesting is even some of the guys, when the guys got their makeup on, it was so funny because you could tell that they felt pretty, kind of like they acted differently, and they weren't acting in a way that was degrading at all. Like they weren't being silly about being like girly because they have makeup on. They just, I don't know, it was really interesting to see that it was almost as if they felt pretty.
Like it, for me, when you were first describing it, I instantly felt sad that that's what's required for us to step out into the world with confidence. But it's almost like the makeup in the clothes and whatever, that image is giving you permission to access something that you already have within you, like to become this character, or step out your front door and go get groceries with confidence, knowing people are going to see you in public. That you need that permission to walk with confidence that makes me really sad, actually.
Well, I think what's perhaps important to consider is the intention behind wearing the makeup, and I think that comes down to all things. So for example, if you want to, as we are runners, if your intentions behind running are negative, counteractive, then running is a bad thing for you. Where running, it can be unhealthy. You're running so much, so often, you're pushing it and you're not listening to your body, becoming injured, and you have all these hard expectations, and it becomes a negative impact on your life versus being the opposite of that. Right? So even healthy things can be bad for you with the wrong intention. So I think makeup, perhaps, and things like that, makeup, even hairstyle, any clothing, whatever, they can all have a positive or negative impact depending on how you're choosing to go about that. So if you're putting on makeup just because you enjoy just the
art of it.
The art of it. Like Tegan just loves putting on makeup because it's fun for her to change her appearance and to try different colors. So I think, so if that's your purpose behind wearing, all power to you. But if it's this idea of I have to change myself to fit in and to become accepted is the dangerous part of it. Yeah. If I don't do this, I won't get accepted into that job or this environment. That's where obviously the negative side comes. But if you just love painting up and, that all power to you,
I think there are a lot of inherent issues behind a reliance on that mask to be yourself. Yeah. But unfortunately, we're not going to fix that anytime soon. And so I suppose it's tough to quibble with somebody if they truly become their better self through wearing makeup or dressing up. It's really hard to argue that. It's just sad that is the reality of the situation. Now, potentially too, I think a lot of women maybe wear makeup and get dressed up to feel better than other people. And just like Ryan said, it fully is dependent upon the intention. If it really does just make you more confident, then fabulous. But if you're starting to wear makeup because you're comparing yourself to other people and you want to either bring yourself up to their beauty standard or be better than them and feel better than them, there are some major societal issues with that.
Well, like I think of our daughters, at some point in their life where they feel like they have to wear makeup, whether it's peer pressure from other girls that they're friends with or boys or whatever, where they start seeking to wear makeup to fit in. And instead of just being comfortable in their own skin. I think that's the problem. That's the tipping point, you know, versus if it's just for fun and creativity and it's just an exploration of self-awareness and whatever you want to throw at it. That's the tipping point for me, is where it's, and that goes for anything, you know, that even goes for clothing, that goes for whatever you want to talk about. You know, it's when that motivation is coming from a very unhealthy perspective
I distinctly remember being, you know, a teenager and being told I was pale, so I should wear blush because I was very pale. And that is like a dialogue that has stuck with me forever. So whenever I'm getting ready for anything, blush is like, if you were to ask me like what are my number one things are in my little makeup kit, I don't wear much makeup, but when I do wear makeup, like blush is a non-negotiable.
I had this same thing. My grandma used to say the same thing. I was like, every time I saw her, she'd pull out her little blush from her purse and she'd blush up my cheeks. Because she's like,
what is it? Are we supposed to always look like we were just like ran around the block and have this like red glow on our face or something? Like, it's so ridiculous.
Jody, was it a man or a woman that said that to you? Do you remember? And do you think there would have been a difference? What if a man said it to you?
Sure. I don't know if it would have made I probably wouldn't have. I don't think a man would tell me that, and I don't think I would take him seriously if he did. Like, it was more because it was a female giving me that criticism.
So that's really interesting. Hey, like in all of this, a man would never say that. You guys clearly don't give two craps about the makeup that we put on our faces. So it's not, the reason why we are so concerned about looking a certain way actually has nothing to do with attracting the opposite sex. Although we might think it does, that we're wanting to be beautiful and attractive, but actually according to you guys, and this is two people out of all of men, but probably you are representing a lot of men. To you guys, it means absolutely nothing and is completely bogus and ridiculous, this thing that we have to do to make ourselves pretty, and you would actually rather us not be wearing the makeup. So we are actually putting on makeup to impress other women, which seems biologically backwards.
Makeup, we can get out the door a lot faster.
Yes.
It's true.
There's one point that you missed though, Court, and that is that some men are attracted to that. A woman who has that makeup, but that could be a red flag. It might not be the best thing for that woman. So it just, again, what Ryan said, it really depends on the intention of, who are you doing it for? Who are you trying to attract? And are you becoming a better self through it?
Sure makes me think a lot too about, as moms, just modeling the fact that, you know, I don't always have to put makeup on when I go out of the door, just to set them up, like just to go off of what Ryan said too, to at least give your children the opportunity to make that choice on their own, so that it's not something that's a requirement, but that it's something that if you choose to wear makeup, that it's something that is fun and creative, because it you feel like you're getting to express yourself in a way that makeup is the tool for, right? It's not a requirement for beauty.
I think the comparison for perhaps males, like obviously a lot of this would start for females, for women in their youth. I think the comparison or the comparable thing for men would be, you know, musculature and being fit, right? And having the six pack and, you know, and feeling that pressure to look physically a certain way. For you guys, it's obviously, there's more aspects to this, but I'm just trying to think of what would be the comparable thing for a guy. And I think that would be it. It would be having a gym membership, or, you know, having that. If you don't, you know, then there's that negative, you know, self-talk and whatnot, self-image that can relate to that. And again, a lot of these things start in the youth. So I think, you know, for our children, it's those discussions like, well, okay, well, why do you want to start doing this or that? You know, what's your intentions behind that, and trying to get them to, you know, as a parent, trying to understand what is their intentions. Is like for Tegan, Tegan wants to put on lipstick. It's just because she thinks this is the funnest thing in the world to add color and that kind of thing. You know, but for if Ella started asking to wear makeup, that would be a little more like, well, why? Like, what's your...
Yeah, that would be a red flag, because she's like the no makeup girl right now. So as soon as she brings that conversation home, we know somebody else is influencing her from the outside, right?
And then for men, all of a sudden wanting to go to the gym, well, if you're just trying to get more fit, which is obviously a good thing, or you're trying to get onto a sports team or to accomplish a goal, that's one thing. But if it's about, fitting in, that can lead to unhealthy training habits, taking protein and creatine in unhealthy ways and quantities, and then maybe opening doors towards, anabolic steroids, and to perpetuate and try to achieve goals that are very difficult to achieve. And it just leads down to a very unhealthy road. So again, what's that intention behind those choices?
You know what it seems to me, and maybe you guys can correct me if you feel differently, but it seems to me that expectation for women believe it's an external pressure, whereas personally, and maybe I'm speaking for most men, I believe that there's, for men, more of an internal pressure to look a certain way. It's not a societal pressure. I don't believe there's as much societal pressure for men to look a certain way as there is for women, but women, I think, are bombarded with this external pressure.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that. I think nowadays, like for when you and I grew up, Braden, I think that's totally true, that men put a lot of pressure on themselves coming from external sources, whether like older siblings harassing you because you're scrawny or something like that. But women were bombarded with the advertisements and that kind of thing. Young girls comparing themselves to models, and
I see it more in the male side now, though.
That's what
I really do. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's just the thing, that nowadays there's a lot more of that on social media, where young boys probably are seeing a lot more. It's just a lot more prevalent seeing men that are more groomed and have a certain appearance, especially with Instagram, of course.
Yeah.
Men that are putting themselves out there have a certain physical appearance, and so I think we'll may see a little more increase in young men going down that same road.
Agreed.
Yeah. We had a question: what advice would you guys give women in regards to their body image? I feel like the advice that you said of pay attention to what your intention is beautiful, but do you guys have anything else that you would add to that if you're giving women advice on their body image?
Yeah, I would say be careful who you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I mean, like it's understanding, like where your heart is leading from, and where, what's the purpose of your existence at that moment in time. If you're a mother of 3 kids and working a full-time job, and and you have a negative self-image, well, I'm sorry, you just produced 3 human beings. In terms of understanding, like, if your body image is not that of a supermodel or this or that, we'll understand that, you're not a supermodel. You're a mom of 3 children, right? And so, just like, your body literally made humans, and like having the right perspective as to, like, what is your intention? If you want to be a supermodel, then go out and attain that. But if like for myself, I often compare my physical well-being, like my physical fitness. I'm hard on myself about where I am in terms of my physical health. But I'm like, well, no, I've gone through many adverse situations in terms of injuries. So to be hard on myself for not being in like super fit, I can run 100 miles is kind of unrealistic. Even though I still do it to myself, it's not realistic. And I think the biggest message I would have is that, be in love with where you are in life, and allow that to be your guide in terms of finding peace within that. More than anything external, find what's internally powerful and meaningful to you, and that will, I think, will guide you towards finding that happiness. If that makes sense.
Such necessary awareness of self, which for young girls, young guys too, it's a lot to ask, but we're not incapable of it. Yeah, like that's like I think definitely in our demographic, women that have gone through so much in their life up to this point, to be so critical of their bodies, it's kind of like, their movie, The Guardian, Kevin Costner and what's his name? That 70s show. Kelso.
Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, where they're Coast Guard swimmers, And this they're in this bar, and Kevin Costner's taking advice from his friend who's the bartender, and she's like, you know, saying to him like, if my knees hurt, it's because I've walked those stairs 1,000 times. You know, if my muscles ache, it's because I lift that box, you know, every day, day in and day out. If I have, you know, wrinkles on my face, it's because I spent thousands of hours in the sunlight, you know, and just accepting that you are where you are because of where your life has taken you, you know, and to be happy and content with that beauty that it is, because it is what got you to this point, you know.
Nice Costner reference.
Like it. I like this because it's really threads into the course that Courtney and I are creating in terms of trying to lead women down that exact path of becoming more self-aware and becoming aware of what your true values are and desires are and how you actually want your body to serve you. Because we do
not look. It's not about what your body looks like. It's like, how is your body going to serve you and being who you want to be?
Because we get distracted by all these like shiny, it's like shiny object syndrome, right? Where you get distracted by what this looks like and what that looks like. You know, that sounds like it would, you know, be good, a good life. Whereas if we really dive deep into ourselves and figure out how we actually want our bodies to serve us, a lot of us would probably be pretty happy with our body right now because maybe our bodies are already serving us how we want them to serve us.
Well, just this is a weird example, but my dad was a heavy duty mechanic his entire life, and he never wore his wedding band to work because of the risk it presents as being a mechanic. So it always just sat on his dresser. And when he retired, finally he started wearing his wedding band again because he was retired. He was turning wrenches every day because it was just too much to take it on and off every day. But he hadn't worn it in decades, and it wouldn't even fit on his finger because his hands were so gnarled and thicker because he used his hands every day to turn wrenches to provide for his family. So the fact that ring wouldn't fit on his hand is an indicator of how hard he worked for decades providing for his family, you know, to be like, and I think that for women, you know, where all of us, our bodies will change as we age, regardless of our desire. But what has happened in those steps that have gotten to that point, you know, like sure, that dress may not fit the same way or that shirt or those pants, and, you know, but what has transpired since that has happened and what have you accomplished? And there's more meaning behind those days than that dress or that shirt or that pair of pants or the number of, you know, holes on your belt loop.
And I think kind of like splitting your life and seeing your life in chapters and small goals and small purposes in each chapter, and obviously under this overarching umbrella of like a bigger dream and bigger purposes and things like that. But in little chapters, like, so for example, my brother-in-law right now is he's a firefighter in Fort McMurray, and they do a calendar, like a fireman calendar, and it's something that's a sort of a dream of his, is to be fit enough, you know, to like have that really like Baywatch kind of bod to get into the calendar, but it's really exciting for him. And so this is a little chapter of his life where he's going to be manipulating his body to be working towards this goal. And it makes me think of, you know, last year I ran a half marathon for the first time. And so I was using my body in a completely different way. And sometimes I find that I forget that sometimes chapters end, and like I don't need to continue to do the same things with my body in the next chapter. Like I need to open up that next chapter and start to explore, okay, now how is my body going to serve me now? And I'm finding in my life, like come spring, my brain, my mind is telling me like, get outside, start running, it's time to train. And I'm like, what am I training for? Like, actually the things that are making me the happiest right now is when I go upstairs into the bedroom that gets beautiful sunlight and has a view, and I sit there and I do like deep breathing meditation. And then I feel just as good as if I trained and I went for a run, or, you know what I mean? Like I feel alive. And it's that question of what makes me feel most alive in this moment, and how can, like, it doesn't matter. Maybe it is how your body looks. For my brother-in-law, it's how his body looks in this moment. But, you know, after that photo shoot is done, it doesn't really matter after that, right? And I think he'll probably have the awareness to see that. But, you know, like just those chapters of what is the chapter that you're in, right? Like,
that was a great comparable, Ryan. It's like being proud of your story, hey? And so
yeah,
back to the mother who has 3 kids, probably she's going to have relatively wide shoulders, probably poor posture, and there are things that she should be proud of in raising those kids, just like your dad having that gnarled hand. I think that's really a good point.
yeah.
I was just saw a clip from one of Joe Rogan's podcasts where he interviewed Mike Tyson, and this is not word for word quote, but he basically asked him, like, do you train, do you work out, do you miss being in that kind of shape? And Mike Tyson was like, no, not at all, because of who he became when he was in that good of shape. He said that I can't go to the gym, I can't hit the bag or go, like, do you even run? He's like, no, I don't even run, because when he does, his competitiveness and his ego takes over, and it puts him to this very unhealthy mental space that turned him into just a monster that was beneficial in the ring, but ultimately, according to Mike Tyson, destroyed his life, put him in the psych ward, and abusive to partners and stuff like that. So to obtain that high level of physical fitness, like Mike Tyson now is, not necessarily quote unquote Mr. Olympian athlete, appearance wise, but seems like Mike Tyson is far more happier being in that quote unquote out of shape than he ever was when he was in the prime of his physical fitness. And it's because he knows that the journey he's on and what it takes to be where he is now is far more beneficial than it ever was to what it took to get him into that supreme fitness level.
Yeah. What a great example.
Yeah.
What a great example. I want to kind of just switch gears a little bit and sort of, you guys sort of touched a little bit on body image issues for men. Did you want to add to that at all? Like you said, sort of that musculature and things like that, but is there anything that you wanted to add? And if not, that's okay.
For me, I see a lot of parallels in terms of men's abilities. I think a lot of very fit men have a hubris about what they're able to accomplish, and they start believing that that's defining them, and that's what they're posting on Instagram is them doing 20 chin-ups or whatever it might be, and I think there's a lot of parallel to women's image there, and I do feel a lot of envy when I see people in their abilities, and they're much better than me, and it is a little bit motivating, but in perhaps an unhealthy way if you take it a little bit too far.
I can see that, like the Strava epidemic, right? Of comparison on Strava.
Yeah, no, I think, like I think men struggle just as much as women, but it's just not as well understood, aware, communicated, shared, talked about. Men just go about it, perhaps men do go about it and handle it differently, but I think it's all there. I know for myself personally, having my concussion and now the issues with my foot where I can't be active in the ways I used to. It's been really hard because I see everyone around me, still running and training and doing these races, that I wish I could do. And then I look at where my fitness level is and my body image wise. And I'm very conscious of it. And there's not a whole lot I can do about it per se, until certain things heal, and I think there's there for many men. I think men just have a different way of handling it. And it may not necessarily be healthy ways that men handle it, but I don't know. I think it really depends on the male, because I think also guys are very content to have the stereotypical, dad beer gut, and they're quite proud of it. They're like, because I think men just can accept where their bodies are and be like, yeah, I'm here where I am, but you know what? I did this and I did that and I got injured doing that. And I think that's a huge accomplishment. Like I got this battle wound, like this knee replacement that, I think men handle it a little bit differently than women, but I think it's still there. I think it's still prevalent within men's society. I think men just tackle it different, approach it differently.
Yeah.
There is a lot of required machismo as a man. You just look at terms like man up, or you know what I mean, or pardon my French, but if you fall down on a hockey rink, they're going to be like, get up, you pussy. But if you've got a concussion, it's best that you don't get up, you know, if you got a neck injury. And so men definitely have these pressures to maybe overextend themselves in an unhealthy way.
Do you guys feel like there's pressure coming from women when it comes to body image? Or again, like, I think we sort of understood in a large way, women put the pressure on ourselves and we compare ourselves to other women. How does that compare to you guys?
It was interesting. I can't remember where it was. It was like, I think it was on a late night show, like was it Jimmy Fallon or someone like that, like on the street interview type thing. Or maybe this was the news. I can't remember. But they were interviewing young women, or just women in jail, like 20s and 30s or whatever. And they showed them an image. I don't think it was an image. They basically said, do you want the chiseled boyfriend or the beer belly boyfriend? You know, kind of idea. Like, which is your preference? And majority of the women said they would prefer to have kind of the man that was not quite so physically chiseled and a little more frumpy, a little more roly-poly, a little bit. They lean that side of things. And not a lot, but a number of the women said because it took the pressure off them.
I was just going to say that.
You know, they're like, you know, if he looks like that, then I don't feel like I have to look a certain way. You know,
right? Yeah.
A lot of them said, like, I'm just not attracted to that, like, you know, that mentality and always being, you know, striving for that. A lot of them were just not attracted to that. Some were, clearly. Some were like, yeah, no, I want that. I like that body image, that style, that motivation, that drive. You know, I think there is, you know, obviously it depends on the individual, but I think there is still that outwardly pressure. But again, it is a lot different for men as to how it approaches them or hits them.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of the stereotypical dating apps and online dating. And I think a lot of people, if you're flipping through there, inevitably you're going to feel, I'm not worthy of this person. I need to up my game. So unfortunately, that is a cyclical force between both men and women. A very unhealthy cyclical force, because what you're seeing isn't the reality. Those are the Instagram photos.
Yeah.
Again, like if you were going to the gym, like we have my good friend of mine, you know, we lived as roommates together, and he was religiously at the gym day in and day out. You know, he would not change his gym schedule for anything. But it wasn't motivated behind appearance. He wasn't motivated because he wanted to look a certain way. Yeah. He was just so committed to eating healthy, living healthy. You know, like we'd be going out drinking, he'd have one beer, and why would he not have the second one? Yeah, he just felt it wasn't good for his body, you know, in terms of being drunk and hungover. You know, so again, it goes back to what we said earlier about the intention behind what you're striving for. You want to be chiseled, that's awesome. You know, I think.
Yeah, if it's a healthy intention.
Yeah. That's a lot like you, Joe. Like you're religious about your morning, you know what I mean? Like your morning runs, but it's your intention behind it is because it feeds your soul.
Yeah,
right? Like that.
My therapy. It's my thinking time. It's my creative time. That's where I come up with all my ideas. And honestly, it just sets up my day for success.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely not doing it for any other reason.
I feel like we should end with one more question. What do you think, Jode?
Okay, well, let's take a look at what we have. We have some big questions. We probably shouldn't tackle a really, really big question. Hey, here's a question. One of the questions that we kind of skipped over at the beginning that I think might be kind of nice to leave off on because it's positive is, from your perspective, what are women doing right?
Don't jump up.
Careful. I think, especially in our community, you know, where we are, so because that's all we compare to, I guess. Mm-hmm. You know, I think there's a lot of women today are really just focused on living healthy. I know, speaking for like my mother, for example, and like my grandmother. You know, two people come to mind. They are so committed to just living a healthy lifestyle. and not necessarily from an untrue perspective, just living more healthy, and men certainly need to follow that lead. I know I can say that for myself personally, like Jody just strives to live healthy. So I think in general, like women just overall really strive for balance and healthy, whether it's nutrition, sleeping habits, drinking and exercise. I think women just have that much healthier perspective on that. Men are a lot more extreme. They're either climbing Mount Everest or they're, couch potato. I think men live between those two extremes, and women can find that balance. I think especially nowadays, especially in our community, you see a lot of that, women just really striving and just living in that. It's not like I'm either running 100 miles or I'm on the couch injured. That's kind of where I've been for the last 7 years. Either I was training my butt off or I'm crashing, and women are just finding that balance and they're just cruising.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. And Courtney and I talk about this all the time, how if Courtney needs me to get something done, she almost has to physically, manually put it into my GPS. And I've got my mind set on one goal in front of me, and women are much better whole picture thinkers, and they've got better foresight. And I think this is a fair blanket statement. Women are just different thinkers, and in such a positive way. That's why we balance each other out so successfully. And without each other, our lows would be a lot lower than they are now, and our highs wouldn't be as high as they are. So I think we bring each other up when we need, right?
I think too, I see, and this might be just within our community, but I see lots of women kind of banding together in a healthy way, right? Where they're supporting each other, like you said, just like a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, the other thing too, if we're talking about direct differences between men and women have such a strength in their vulnerability and being vulnerable with other women and their friends, and men don't have that often, not often at all. Maybe with your closest friends, but not in groups like women do. And so I think women are really successful at finding an outlet like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about, actually, Courtney and I, and like how we can play a role in encouraging that to transition into young men and just men in general. How do women who are good at that support men in creating the same kind of environment?
But keep in mind, it might not be the best thing for men. We're just wired differently, right? Like I have no desire to phone Ryan when I'm having a bad day and cry on his shoulder, but for some women, that's what they need, right?
I'm here.
If you need that.
E-hug.
But I know what you're saying, though, like for it to be more socially acceptable for men to be able to express themselves and be mindful of, like, be mindful of what they're needing for themselves, and then also to be able to express that without feeling like a sissy kind of thing.
Yes,
it's
gonna be a hard path, and especially hard if it's you guys, for example, that are taking on that task. It's gonna be hard. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what I would need. So for women to find it, it will be tough. Not that it's impossible, because there's so many positives to that aspect of a female relationship that maybe men could use a little bit more of.
Well, again, I think it stems a lot from men traditionally being put into that role of literally going out solo to bring back resources for the family. Women being the matriarch would hold down the fort, literally. I mean, even traditionally, women being the matriarch bind and hold the unit together. And think of all your grandmas and great grandmas. They were the binding force of the entire herd of family. Versus men are almost expected to, but do so willingly. Will go off to work that set, work the 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and do that willingly. And that's their role. And if it was between the two of them, okay, I'll do it, dad will do it, kind of idea. And as such, and that goes way back to the homesteads, to the wars, to you name it. Men were placed in that role, and therefore have come to developed a mentality of having to handle adversity on their own. And it's almost, as you said, it's accepted. Get up, get up, you wimp, like deal with it. Because that's how men had to behave in order to survive eons ago. And it's just perpetuated to this day. It doesn't make it right. But it's way men have been basically asked to handle the world that they've been handed to. And it leads to a lot of imbalances in men, the all or none mentality, but it's definitely the way in which women lead is leading by example of how to bind and come together and to ask for support.
Well, and definitely that mentality definitely still serves some families for sure, right? Where for income purposes, some men have to, or one of the, parties in the family, adults in the family, have to go off and work somewhere else for 2 weeks and come home. And it is often the men. And so it's almost still in some cases, it's still a survival mechanism, right? It's still necessary for somebody to be able to kind of disconnect for that. Yeah.
I think that it's cool I think it's just cool to learn from each other. And I think as women, we have ways that in general work really well for us. But I find a lot of times, one of my favorite things about being married is learning about the male way and just how a guy thinks and how a guy processes things, because sometimes the way that I typically tend to process something isn't the most effective way in a particular situation. And it is so helpful sometimes for me to be like, how would Braden handle this? And I can use a tool from his toolbox in a particular moment. And I think that's really kind of how we can serve each other too, right? Where sometimes I know that Braden might be like, what would Courtney do here? Or what would, you know what I mean? And to have that interconnectivity like that, and to be able to be who you are, but also to understand. And I like this conversation because it's helping us to understand a little bit more about each other, and just, and being able to share our tools without having to become each other or become something different. Just still be able to be true to who we are.
That's exactly why we have them as our board of directors, right?
Yeah.
Because we need that balance. We need that perspective of like, pull us back to the path, right? Remind us why we're doing what we're doing, because they see things in a different way, which we need. We need to see it from their perspective quite often to keep ourselves on the path we chose.
Yeah.
I think it's both, like just partnerships in general, right? That you seek partnerships, whether in business or in life, because you can't see all the openings and all the barriers and all the solutions. And that's why we form partnerships.
Yeah.
Should
probably wrap this up. Hey, Court.
Yeah. I think that's a good spot to end, actually.
Going all day.
We should probably mention too that we hope to have 2 other special guests joining us, either next week or in the weeks to follow, our moms. And we want to continue this conversation around body image, then talking with 2 other experts in the field who are females, and who are a generation ahead of us, and the things that they've learned in their lifetimes. And actually they're two very different people with 2 very different experiences in terms of body image growing up. And so kind of diving into that a little bit more, talking with 4 women this time. So if you're interested in that, definitely stay tuned for that. We put out these video podcasts once a week, Sundays in the evening time is when they come out, and then you can watch the replay as many times as you want. Ryan watches them every day. Yeah. That's when he wakes up and throws on Jody and Court. That's his meditation. And then he, and if you enjoy these videos and you want to see more of them, help us out by hitting subscribe or like, or leave a comment, leave questions. We love to engage with you as much as possible. If there are things that you, questions that you want answered, or just feedback, we love to hear from you. It like fires us up to no end. So please definitely share your thoughts with us.
And thanks to these guys for
thank you guys very much.
It was really fun. All right.
Welcome. Thanks, guys.
I like the share thumbs up. Alrighty, I guess until next time.
Until next time, guys. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.